This is not a discussion about politics anymore. This has now become a lawsuit by the federal government, the Biden administration filing the lawsuit against the state of Georgia to try to invalidate this, the new law and the new provisions, which I think we've gone through very clearly to say these new laws and new provisions. Again, when you look at the other states, it's still more generous.
The challenge that has been raised here by the Department of Justice is they treat minority citizens, Harry, as if they are literally second-class citizens.
They are simply claiming without a shred of evidence that the Georgia law is indeed racist. The only way the Georgia law is racist is if African Americans are deprived of their own agency, their own ability to make their own decisions, their ability to read.
Allowing for a requirement of a voter ID, which, by the way, is required, as Jordan said, in Maryland and Pennsylvania. And in Georgia, the voter ID could be a utility bill. But that requiring it and requiring it a certain amount of days is just disproportionately unfair to the minority communities, as if they cannot follow the rules. That to me, that's the racial prejudice.
Politicizing voting, dividing the country along these racial lines, which is, I think, part of the strategy here with this lawsuit specifically, because we pointed out, what about all these other states where Georgia has is more generous? Are you filing lawsuits against them?
This is how the framers intended it. That's why they gave the authority to the state legislators. They wanted them to take a deliberate sort of long-term approach on how their elections would run. And Jordan, they didn't want every state to look the same. They didn't want it to be one size fits all.
Under the new law in Georgia, 17 days of in-person early voting, only 9 days in New Jersey or New York. That provision on licensings or state ID requirements to get the absentee or apply for a mail-in ballot is identical to the same provision in Pennsylvania and Maryland.
There's a question raised in the Georgia case that forcing election officials to wait until the polls close to start counting votes. And again, this is kind of the allegation. This would allow people to sow doubt over the outcome of an election. Well, a lot of states, you don't pre-count. In fact, Delaware, Joe Biden's home state, does not allow, Andy, the pre-counting of elections.
The Constitution vests the means, manner, and method of conducting elections in the state legislatures and in the sovereignty of each individual state. These are attempts to federalize the election process entirely. That's what I see this as, and unconstitutional in my view.
I think it's a little bit interesting to note that this lawsuit from the DOJ comes in the wake of what? It comes in the wake of a failed legislative effort to federalize elections. So to me, when that effort failed, this is a second step to say, well, if we can't get it all, we're still going to get as much power in Washington, D.C. through the DOJ as we can.
So the states said, okay, we looked at what happened this last election cycle. We're going to go back into our law,
tighten some things up.
Right, exactly. It's not to say we're not going to allow early voting. We're just going to have make it a little bit clear about what you have to do for early voting. What you have to do to these ballot drop boxes will be official state ballot drop boxes. They're not going to be nonprofit groups and random people harvesting ballots.
What they're trying to do is to arrogate and concentrate power in Washington, D.C., and to tell us in the states how to vote, what to vote, when to vote, how to vote, where to put our machines, when to send out our absentee ballots, when not to send them out, when you can mail in ballot, when you can't mail in ballot, whether you can have a voting day. Maybe they're going to come up with eventually saying, the Department of Justice, that you can't have a voting day. It's just going to be come one, serve all. That's the problem that I see, is the federalization of the process and the concentration of power in Washington.
Yep.
They do care about one thing and one thing only, political power. And so at the end of the day, this is a power grab by Washington, basically to destroy or to overturn the wishes of the voters in the state of Georgia.
We had a mess in our country in 2020. With the elections, people lost faith in our electoral system. It doesn't matter if they were right or wrong in that thought. They lost faith. How many 2020s do you want to live through?